Kismat, we are going live now, so don't disturb. Okay. What a nice name. The first thing that I see, good morning to all of you, is Aapne ghabrana nahi hai. Good morning to you too. Yeah, they say that when you're going to bat for the first time, you feel butterflies in your stomach. That is nervousness. But if you are not nervous, then you don't pay the same attention. Uh, so So it is still 2 minutes early, so I'm not going to formally start. One of my cats is trying to join. You can see her there in the corner, right there. She's trying to join the live stream. So let us hope she goes away, or she is welcome to join. She's not very troublesome. This is I have some important announcements to make today, and some people like to join uh, exactly on time. So so I will not. If you are hearing my voice clearly, can one of you, Dhanraj Kumar, can you tell me if you are hearing my voice loud and clear? I am known for having a very soft voice, and sometimes I do speak slowly. Uh, your cat is also watching. That's good fun. Cats are wonderful animals. We used to be first dog people. We had a dog called Dogma. He passed away 2 years ago and left a hole in our hearts. And we don't have the heart to get another one, but we do have two cats, Kismat and Billu, and they keep us busy. And yes, Umesh, Jai Hind to you too. Umesh, you must Google. There is an IS officer, retired IS officer from the Hyderabad car recall. I'm forgetting his name. His name was, I think, Luther, who wrote a book, and he talked about how the phrase Jai Hind was first coined by somebody from Hyderabad, and that was very interesting to note. I think if you read the Wikipedia page on Jai Hind, you will see that it has Hyderabadi origins. So yes, Jai Hind to all of you. All right, that's the time. Welcome to Conversation Live Stream 2. I'm Muqtedar Khan, your host, and to all of you who are watching in South Asia, aap sabko mera salam, namaste, sat sri akal, vanakkam, and namaskaram. So I have a few things to talk about, but before that, I want to thank four people. I'm sorry I did not notice this before, but when I did the first live stream, some people actually gave me money. Apparently, you can give me money. So do make use of that. Those of you who have extra money to spare. Mr. Suman Prakash gave me money, and I didn't realize that till just a week or two ago. And since I had decided that I was going to do live stream too, so I thought I will thank you in person. Mr. M. Takhel also gave me some money. Shukriya aapka bahut bahut to both of you. Mr. Mahendra Pal. Mr. Mahendra Pal is a very generous soul. He has given money twice. So thank you very much to you, Mahendra, and let this become a habit. May God bless you and keep you prosperous. So I will make this announcement again sometime later. If I don't, one of you should remind me because it's possible that they may have not joined the live stream yet. So, some of the announcements. The first and the most important announcement is that my next book, Emerging Global Order After the Russia Ukraine War, is dropping in the sense that it will be published. It is an ebook, so it will be available to all of you for free. You can read individual chapters separately, or you can read the whole document in an ebook format. It is called in a PDF format, Emerging World Order After the Russia-Ukraine War. It will be available. There are some very, very prominent scholars in it. Dr. Amitava Acharya, who is a professor at the American University. He was the president of the International Studies Association, and he's probably the most important scholar who writes about international relations from a non-Western perspective. So I'm very grateful for Professor Amitava Acharya's essay in that book. Dr. Shibli Telhami also contributed. He is the Anwar Sadat professor at the University of Maryland, College Park. His essay is very interesting. You should read it. He is a very prominent voice. He was my colleague at the Brookings Institute. He's still a non-resident fellow at the Brookings Institute, is a major advisor to the U.S. government on its policies towards the Middle East. I have Raffaello Marchetti, a professor from Louis University in Rome, Italy. He's bringing the European perspective on the post-Russia Ukraine war world order. He's a very prominent scholar on both sides of the Atlantic. In fact, today he is speaking in Montreal at the International Studies Association. And then we have an interesting essay written by three scholars from one from India, one from Pakistan, and one from Bangladesh. From Bangladesh, Professor Marufa Akhtar; from Pakistan, Professor Leghari Ahmed; and from India, from Kerala, Shelley Johnny, Professor Shelley Johnny. All three of them looked at how the world will look after the Russia-Ukraine war from an Indian perspective. तो आप सबको मैं ये बताऊं कि मेरी एक नई किताब अब कल कल परसों पब्लिश, ये मंडे से पहले हो जाएगी इंशाल्लाह। मैं आप सबको लिंक्स भिजा दूंगा ट्विटर पर भी, और कम्युनिटी अनाउंसमेंट्स पर भी मैं अनाउंस कर दूंगा किताब का लिंक। किताब फ्री है, इट इज़ एन ई बुक, ताकि जितने ज़्यादा लोगों को पहुंच सके वो पहुंचेगी। इट इज़ पब्लिश बाय वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट थिंक टैंक इन वाशिंगटन, उसका नाम है न्यू लाइन्स इंस्टीट्यूट। और उसमें काफ़ी महत्वपूर्ण ऑथर्स हैं। अमिताभ आचार्य जो खुद इंडिया से हैं और नॉन वेस्टर्न पर्सपेक्टिव इन इंटरनेशनल रिलेशंस पे वो शायद दुनिया के सबसे इम्पोर्टेंट स्कॉलर हैं। और फिर डॉक्टर शिबली तेलहामी जो अमेरिका में है, मिडल ईस्ट पॉलिसी करते हैं, उनका एक चैप्टर है इस किताब में। रफाइल मार्शेटी जो इटली से है और यूरोप के काफ़ी प्रोमिनेंट स्कॉलर है इंटरनेशनल रिलेशंस के, उनका एक ऐसे है। और एक ऐसे है जो इंडिया, पाकिस्तान, बांग्लादेश के स्कॉलर्स, तीन स्कॉलर्स, बांग्लादेश से मारूफा अख्तर, इंडिया से शली जॉनी और पाकिस्तान से फारूक लेगारी, तीनों ने मिलकर एक ऐसे लिखा कि दुनिया अगर साउथ एशिया की नज़रों से देखा जाए, लेंसेज से देखा जाए, तो कैसा लगेगी आफ्टर द एंड ऑफ द रशिया यूक्रेन वॉर। और ऑफ कोर्स उसमें मेरा भी इंट्रोडक्टरी ऐसे है। छोटी सी किताब है, इट विल बी अवेलेबल एक दो दिन में। मैं लिंक्स भिजा दूंगा, ट्विटर पर भी भिजा दूंगा और फेसबुक पे भी लगाऊंगा और लिंक्डइन पर भी लगाऊंगा, और आप सबको कम्युनिटी पोस्ट में भी मिल जाएगी। किताब मुफ्त में है। न्यू लाइन्स इंस्टीट्यूट नाम का एक थिंक टैंक है जिन्होंने इसको पब्लिश किया हुआ है। तो आपके चंद सवालात हैं, लेकिन उससे पहले मैं एक अनाउंसमेंट करता हूँ। आप कई लोगों ने पूछा मुझसे कि रमज़ान के लिए व्हाट आर यू डूइंग फॉर the month of Ramadan, and I wanted to let you know that in the past I used to do special issues with authors who either translated or commented on the Quran. But in the last 1 year, the subscriber base from India has increased significantly. There are more than 65% from India. And I think that half of the people who watch who are not from India are also, I think, Indians or Indian diaspora members. And I'm very grateful to all of you for your support. That the viewership that I get is the largest is from India, followed by the US, then Canada, then UK, and then surprisingly Australia and UAE are the next two countries. Sometimes Pakistan comes fourth, and sometimes it comes seventh. So the viewership from Pakistan, not surprisingly, is low. I think they probably will get depression if they watch my channel quite a bit. So this Ramadan, I'm doing a very special show for keeping in mind some of the confusions and issues with Islam in India. The word that Muslims like to talk a lot about is Sharia, Sharia, Sharia. Everything is all about Sharia. To some extent, that some Muslim scholars reduce the concept of Sharia, Islam, the whole of Islam, to just the Sharia, as if it's just a law and nothing else. The Quran has about 6,340 or 6,400 verses, and according to most scholars, less than 5% of that are about law. So the Quran is just 4 or 5% legalistic. The rest of it is spiritual, mystical, cosmological, even historical in some sense. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a special show in trying to show how Muslims come up with what they call is Sharia. So is the Sharia a divine revelation, or is it a man-made construction, or is it a combination of both? Uh, is it that human beings take divine revelations and process it, and then bring in their own biases, their own cultural preferences, their own political preferences, and then uh, articulate what is the Sharia? So that's going to be the most important episode that I will do uh, for Ramadan. Um, and then I will selectively, I might do short ones, 4 5 minutes, a little longer than the shorts, on verses of the Quran that both Muslims and non-Muslims seem to neglect, but they have the same importance, if not more, than the verses of the Quran, which are often quoted and discussed by both Muslims and non-Muslims. So that is the program for Ramadan. One big episode, which will be about 30 40 minutes, and then the rest of them will be short ones. And I will continue. I am trying to reach out to various ambassadors, not just in India, but rest of the world. I have invited several US senators to come and talk. Uh, Senator Carper, it's been more than a week since my invitation to you was sent. Hopefully, your staff will get back to me soon, or I'll have to give them a call tomorrow, probably. So, yes, so that is the program for some. आप में से कई लोगों ने मुझसे पूछा कि रमज़ान में क्या कर रहे हो? मैं रमज़ान में एक बड़ा एपिसोड करूँगा, यानी 30 40 मिनट का, जिसमें मैं ये बताने की कोशिश करूँगा कि इस्लामिक शरिया जो है ये क्या चीज़ है। मैं पलट के बैठ गया हूँ, जब मैं उस तरफ पीठ होती है, मेरे पीछे आप जो किताबें देखते हैं, वो डिफरेंट ट्रांसलेशंस है, डिफरेंट इंटरप्रिटेशंस है, कुरान के और हदीस का कलेक्शंस हैं। ये सारी की सारी, इसको मैं दीवार कहता हूँ, शरिया की दीवार है। तो इस शरिया की दीवार क्या चीज़ है? लाइक व्हाट इज़ इस्लामिक शरिया? कुरान में 6000 से ज़्यादा आयतें हैं, जिसमें से सिर्फ 5% आर लीगलिस्टिक। तो फिर इतना शरिया का बवाल क्यों है? तो इस चीज़ों को मैं जवाब देने की कोशिश करूँगा आप सबके लिए। और छोटे छोटे-मोटे 5-5 मिनट के 3-4 ऐसे मैं एपिसोड्स करूँगा, जो कुरान की उन चीज़ों को हाइलाइट करेगी जो ज़्यादातर लोग नेग्लेक्ट करते हैं। मैंने एक किताब लिखी थी, एहसान नाम की, जो लास्ट मेरी किताब है, इस्लाम एंड गुड गवर्नेंस। वो और सूफ़ी थॉट से ज़्यादा इन्फ्लुएंस्ड है। लेकिन जो लोग इंडिया में हिंदू फिलॉसफी से वाकिफ़ हैं, और जो कॉन्सेप्ट है दर्शन का, अगर उससे समझते हैं इन हिंदू फिलॉसफी, देन यू विल रियलाइज़ के एहसान और दर्शन में बहुत कॉमनैलिटीज़ हैं। मे बी वी विल टॉक अबाउट दैट इन दिस रमज़ान, के व्हाट इज़ कॉमन इन दर्शन, जो हिंदू का कॉन्सेप्ट है दर्शन, टू टू एक्चुअली सी गॉड, और कुरान में और जो इस्लामिक ट्रेडिशन में जो एहसान का कॉन्सेप्ट है, हाउ इट इज़ सिमिलर। अगर लोग लैंकास्टर में हैं, आप में से किसी, पेंसिल्वेनिया लैंकास्टर, तो मुझे कांटेक्ट करें। इसके नीचे आई विल बी गिविंग अ टॉक ऑन द 31st। वहाँ पर आपको सबको इनवाइट कर सकूँगा मैं, इफ़ यू आर कमिंग। अच्छा, तो थोड़े सवालात आए हैं ऑन द ऑलरेडी इन एडवांस, मैं पहले उनको एड्रेस करने की कोशिश करता हूँ। आकाश ने कहा, सॉरी, एक सवाल कई लोगों ने पूछा था अबाउट द बैंकिंग क्राइसिस इन द यूएस। तो मैं आपको बताता हूँ कि एक तो ये है कि जो स्विट्जरलैंड में जो हुआ है क्रेडिट स्विस के साथ, दैट इज नॉट डायरेक्टली कनेक्टेड टू एसवीबी, जहाँ तक कि मेरी समझ में है, सिलिकॉन वैली बैंक का जो फेलियर हुआ है। क्रेडिट स्विस बेसिकली एक, उसको किसी ने कहा कि इट इज अ गुड प्लेस टू पार्क बैड मनी। So Credit Suisse is a place which is very secretive. It provides financial services, so it's not just a bank. It provides you investment advice. It's a consultant, financial strategies, etc. And they got into trouble because of basically lack of, I guess, investor confidence. And the Saudis, who owned until yesterday 10% of Credit Suisse, refused to invest more, not because they didn't have confidence in the institution, but because they felt that if they had a bigger share than 10%, then they would have to deal with lots of irritating and uh, complicated regulations, especially in Switzerland, etc. So, in order to escape the scrutiny and the troubles of the regulations in Switzerland, they decided not to increase their share holding of that bank. And so it did cause some problems. But the Silicon Valley Bank problem is very interesting, and it is a, a result of several things that happened. Number one is because of COVID, the US government provided a lot of liquidity in the sense they sent a lot of cash into the economy. They sent lots and lots of thousands of dollars to people. Even somebody, alhamdulillah, mashallah, you can see that I am not exactly a poor person. I'm not rich, but I'm not poor. But even I received more than $1,000 from the U.S. government as COVID support, and so lots of people. I just put it in the bank. So lots of people who were not living hand to mouth, they were getting money and they were putting those in the bank. So there was lots of liquidity in the market anyway, and so when tech entrepreneurs started going to venture capitalists and saying, look, I have this idea. I want to make a special kind of camera for conversations where Dr. Khan and his cat can also both simultaneously perform. And venture capitalist says, oh, wow, this is a great idea. There's a lot of market for it. Definitely Dr. Khan will buy, and maybe others will buy it too. And so then the technology people tell the venture capitalists, can you give us $100 million to launch the project? And then this is what was happening. Venture capitalists say, why 100 million? Here, take 200 million. So a lot of tech entrepreneurs apparently in the last few years have been getting more money than they wanted from venture capitalists, and they didn't know where to park the money. And all that money was going into Silicon Valley Bank. It became the biggest bank for tech people. It provided loans, it provided investment strategy. It was the biggest advertiser at every tech event in Silicon Valley and in California. And with all the money from venture capitalists and investments and also profits, once these firms started making money, they started banking with SVB, and it became the 16th biggest bank in the United States. But they did a couple of mistakes. And that mistakes partly go because of this extra money that was coming in from the US government. More than $1 trillion was pumped into the economy. And the Ukraine war, several things happened in the US economy, and one of them was inflation. So the inflation started increasing, and at one point it reached over 8% in the US. And so this bank, which had a lot of cash, decided to buy US Treasury bonds, US government bonds, as a safe and conservative investment of the extra cash that was accumulating in the bank. But they made the mistake, and some of the senior staff also acknowledged that it was really a stupid thing to do, is they put them in bonds which they cannot sell for 10 years. So you can't touch it for 10 years. They're 10-year bonds. It will mature after 10 years. And because the inflation was going up, the federal bank in the US, the central bank of US, we call it the Feds, they decided to raise the interest rates, and interest rates are rising continuously in the US. And as a result of the rise of the interest rates, the value of the bonds went down. And suddenly, the amount of money that SVB had put in the bank, A, they could not get it back. And two, the value of that money started dropping because of the rise of interest rates. When interest rates go up, apparently the value of bonds goes down. So they got trapped. And as a result of that, people started panicking that they might lose their deposits. And so people started withdrawing their deposits. And basically, there was a run on the bank, so to speak. It ran out of money because people kept withdrawing money. And the federal government had now to step in to ensure that the bank does not fail and the deposits are not lost. In the US, there is something called an insurance system for bank accounts. So if you have a bank account in which if you have up to 250,000 US dollars, if the bank goes bankrupt, then you can still get your $250,000 back. If you have, say, 270,000, if you're a smart person, you will open another account and put the rest of the 20 in the second account. So if the bank goes kaput, you will get your 250 and you will also get 20 because each account will get up to $250,000. Unfortunately, many of these depositors didn't do that, and they had far more money than $250,000 in their deposits, which means that their money, there's a question mark of where will that money come from. The feds are not going to give you more than what is insured, which is only $250,000. So you could see that even the investors and depositors were making decisions which were not very smart. So this is a consequence of stupid decision making by both the corporate leadership at SVB and some of the depositors. And I guess this is how the market is correcting. But there's one problem, and that problem is the speed with which the US government intervened. That shows that the federal government is nervous about this bank, so it could become contagious and affect other banks and affect the economy. You could also see that for a little while there was sudden desire to sell out and instability in the markets. Markets are very sentimental, in spite of all the mathematical models and all the exercises that people do. You will find that people are very, very nervous about this, and every time there's some instability in the political arena or the business arena, banking arena, the stock market tends to go bearish. So the stock market is beginning to stabilize. I think today, the Dow Jones actually went up, I think, slightly yesterday. So that is the banking crisis. I think it will affect some banks, but it's not a big issue. I do not expect it to be like 2008 like crisis, but it is making nervous. That's my wife, Reshma Bai, is going to work. So that is some of the challenges that the banking system is facing. Somebody also asked me, actually, several people asked me about the US Senate resolution on the McMahon line as the border between India and China. I think it's a very good thing. It shows that the US Senate has taken the trouble to send a message to China and to India that we are with India. The Senate resolution does not have any legal value because both China and India are not party to some kind of an understanding where the US Senate is acting as an arbiter of the dispute. But what it has done is it has sent a signal to China that when it comes to Arunachal Pradesh, the United States government is with India. The resolution says very clearly that the United States recognizes that Arunachal Pradesh is part of the Indian territory, according to the 1914 agreement of the McMahon Line. China claims that Arunachal Pradesh is essentially southern Tibet, and this resolution of the US Senate basically rejects that Chinese claim, whatever it may be, to any territory below south of the McMahon Line. So, in that sense, you could argue that the United States has thrown its weight behind India and sent a signal to China that when it comes to diplomacy, when it comes to providing weapons, etc., technology in the Indo-China dispute, the US is with India. So I think that is good news for India. In case there is any legal arbitration or discussions about it, this resolution will kind of help India. It is not going to be decisive, but India can say, look, many countries in the world recognize that Arunachal Pradesh has been part of India, is part of India, and will be part of India. So in that sense, that is very, very helpful. Uh, Somebody called Ayush asked me that can India become a sole superpower? I mean, it can, but it could take a long time. The predictions are that by 2075, this is Goldman Sachs predictions, and they could be wrong, but they make a lot of money based on similar predictions. So let's pay some respect to their prediction. They predict that by 2075, India will overtake the United States in total GDP, not in GDP per capita, but total GDP. So in 275, which is about 53 years from now, 52 years from now, there is this prediction that China will be the world's biggest economy, followed by India, followed by the US. There are no predictions, no data forecast to show when India will catch up and overtake China. There are lots of optimistic statements going on Indian YouTube channels and news channels, but see if they are backed by data or some modeling, mathematical or statistical modeling predicting the economies. But just having a bigger economy does not mean you're going to be a bigger and powerful player. So let me give you an example. People say that until 1945, the world's superpower was Great Britain. So we call that period Pax Britannica until 1945. And with the end of the Second World War, the United States became the most powerful country. And we call this current era as Pax Americana, the American hegemony. But if you go back and look at the data, you will find that Britain was never the biggest economy during the first half of the 20th century. Even though it had big colonies, India was still part of Great Britain, and they were simply sucking India dry. They really looted India to the tune of $45 trillion. But the United States had probably caught up and overtaken the British economy in 1870s or 1880s. By then, the US was probably the world's biggest economy, bigger than UK, bigger than the British Empire, bigger than Germany and Japan, the major powers at that time. But it was not a major world power. It did not choose to remain more or less isolated until the end of World War II, and it was dragged into World War One and then World War II by Japanese attacks on the Pearl Harbor. So India could become the biggest economy by the end of this century, inshallah. But that doesn't necessarily mean it will become the sole superpower. This game is a slow motion game, Ayush, and we shall see what happens with global politics. Since you are interested in this, do make sure to watch the real Game of Thrones for global domination, my last video, in which I kind of discuss how geopolitical pursuit of hegemony and domination takes place and what is the current scorecard in the world. There is also a question about from Rahul Kundu, which says, "What if India and China were to unite?" Well, I don't know what you mean by unite. Unite as in become one country, that is a bit unthinkable. There have been unifications, like Germany's, which is very successful, but that's because West Germany basically owns East Germany. But there have been failures. Syria and Egypt tried to unite and they failed. Because what will happen is if both the countries become one, then who's going to lead it? Are we going to be democratic in the first place? So those things are really far-fetched. What we can think about is can India and China resolve their disputes along the border and not only increase trade, but investments in each other and become economic, diplomatic, and even military allies. If they do, which is unlikely to happen, but if India and China become partners, then the 22nd century, this century, will be, sorry, this is the 21st century. This century will be the Asian century. Undoubtedly, Asia will become the dominant continent already. So we are looking at between India and China that, in fact, right now, if you look at the world, of the four biggest economies, in less than 5 years, I predict three will be Asia: India, China, and Japan, when India jumps over Germany. So India is five. Once India becomes four, it'll be US, China, US, Japan, India, then China, US, India, Indonesia will become fourth, Japan will become fifth, South Korea will move up. And probably by the time you get to 275 and India becomes second, you'll have China, India, US, Indonesia. I don't know what the forecast for Japan is. So basically, the Asian economies are going to dominate. That's the reason why Obama came up with this idea of pivot to Asia, and then Trump with Indo-Pacific strategy, and Biden. So more and more concentration. Biden has got distracted with the Ukraine war, but otherwise, the US strategic community is focused on Asia because this is the future and will remain so for a long time. Let me see if there are any questions from the public here. A lot of you have said a lot of things. Uh, some of you have commented on the fact that why I'm not on various shows in India. Well, I can't go on show. Like I can't just call somebody and say, "Oh, I'm coming on your show today." They have to invite me. Only then can I go on the show. I noticed that a lot of Indian channels use my stuff. Thanks to all of you who keep sending me links and screenshots of various Indian channels and TV stations who are using clips from conversations or my comments on other shows, but they don't actually invite me. So I think they're a bit nervous about what else I might say when I'm live. So they just take what I already said and the parts that they like, they are posting those parts. But we'll see what happens. I have in the past 1.5 years been focusing a lot on South Asia. I used to do a lot of Middle East before that. And as I told people in the past, that I'm getting older and I'm feeling guilty that I have neglected my country of origin, India. So I am making up for it. And so I hope that they do. But as long as my channel is there, you can come and watch here. So that is as far as Indian channels are concerned. I'll answer Farhan Qureshi's question before I explain further about how conversation works. Sir, can India become a media superpower? Well, that's a very interesting question. Countries are not media superpowers. Media is essentially private, right? So the more powerful trends that you see globally are networks like Fox network. It's cable channel is the biggest one in the US. It's very prominent in Australia. Robert Murdoch's family owns it. They own similarly various other conservative media in UK. There haven't been, I think, foreign ownerships of Indian media, but I think there is CNN India, obviously. So I'm not sure that India can become, but can any Indian firm, before Adani was kind of sort of ambushed by the short seller in the US. He had bought NDTV and he was on a buying spree. So somebody like him could emerge and maybe buy CNN or MSNBC, buy Washington Post like Bezos bought it. So that's how you would expand, by buying media that is available. So keep an eye open if you are a billionaire and see which major brand name is not doing well. There was rumors that Newsweek, which is such an important magazine, was sold for a very low amount, and no one was willing to buy it. Journalism is not a very profitable business. The margins are very narrow, at least in the West, and they are facing a lot of challenge from non-traditional. Like, for example, if you look at Subramaniam Swamy, for example, he has thousands of followers on Twitter, and all he does is on Twitter he uses their new format, and he has a channel running on Twitter. And so he's sucking away audience from mainstream media and YouTube. And this, look, all of you who are currently watching Conversations are not watching mainstream. So mainstream journalism is facing a lot of challenge. They depend a lot on government advertisement, especially in India. So the quality of journalism becomes a little more difficult. And these days, the people who are watching are not watching news for the sake of news. They're often watching news for opinions and ideological compatibility. So there's a lot of ideological shopping going on. So if India wants to become a media superpower, then some billionaire in India will have to go around the world and buy up uh, media. Qataris, a lot of their money tried to make Al Jazeera very big. Al Jazeera is prominent, but but it did not catch fire in the US at all. So it hasn't captured the US market. It is very prominent in the global south. Oftentimes, one way to test is when you travel abroad, you turn on your TV, or you look on airports, or you look in various places where television news is running, and see which channel is the default channel in that country. So at some point in many African countries, Al Jazeera had replaced CNN as the default channel. CNN is more popular overseas than in the US. We don't see much of Fox when we travel in Europe or other places, but we do see CNN International. So that's one thing. About conversations, what I want to say is that uh, I'm a professor. I teach, like this semester, I teach on Mondays and Wednesdays. That's why I'm doing this on a Thursday. So I teach on Mondays, Wednesdays, and with the student traffic, I'm very busy. So on those 2 days, I can do nothing. And my editing of the shows that I do, I don't know whether you guys appreciate. I put in a lot of inserts in it. Sometimes articles, sometimes data, sometimes maps, etc. All of that editing takes time. So I'm not able to do more than 6 to 8 episodes on conversations myself per month. I can do single versions; those are easy for me. But when I invite guests, communicating with them, scheduling, etc., does take time. Uh, but when others do the show, like when I go on, say, Rohit Sharma's India Matters with Rohit, I do at least once a week with Rohit, and I do once a week with Khamar Chima or with Dinesh Vorasab. Uh, and when they invite me, then it becomes very easy for me that I just go there, speak my piece. And once they post their videos, I wait for like 20, 30, 40 hours, usually 24 hours, so that because it's their show, and for some of them, revenue matters. So once they have been watched by their audience, then I post it up on my channel for all of you. Some of you are very polite and very nice, and they tell me they watch it again just to give me views. So thank you very much to those of you. So I will try to bring those individuals that people are requesting. I have tried. I have. Sometimes they don't even respond to me, and sometimes they do. So if they are not on the show and you have been requesting for me to invite them to my show, do remember that it's not because I'm not inviting them. Bipul Bharadwaj, thank you very much. It is because I have tried and failed to reach them. Uh, some of these people you're requesting me to invite have their own shows, and they are not inviting me either. I'm much more responsive either on Twitter, or you can always send emails to me. A lot of my information is publicly available, etc. Manjit Singh has a question on yes, a lot of students who are watching this keep asking me about how I, who was an engineer, became what I am today. Part of it is also a personality thing, right? But let me tell you that I know a lot of engineers who are now professors of social sciences, besides also cricketers. So I was not ever interested in engineering. And as I tell my students that at the time I was growing up in India in the 1980s, you could be only three things in India. You could be either an engineer or a doctor or a loser. Three things. I didn't want to be a loser, so I was left with engineering and doctor. And I don't like touching meat and flesh and other people's bodies. So the idea of being a doctor didn't really appeal to me. So I had only one choice, to become an engineer. So I became an engineer. I hardly ever studied engineering. I would just listen to one of my friends. His name is Naeem. I hope he's watching. So Naeem would tell me, Muqtedar, so tomorrow is the test in electromagnetic theory. These are the questions. These many you have to answer to pass, and this is how you should do that. And so that's how I ended up, even though I did get first class grades, and I did want to do a PhD in physics. I don't know why, for a little while, I had the mood that physics was the real science. And I did get admitted, I think, to University of Maryland, College Park, but I didn't come. I went to SPJN instead, did an MBA, worked for a couple of years, 3 years in Bombay at that time, Mumbai now. And I worked for Larsen and Toubro. I worked for Procter and Gamble. I worked for some ad agency called Trikaya Gray. And then I came to the US to do a PhD in management information system. But when I came to the US, I said, wow, the system is really designed to maximize what you want to be. There's a slogan in the US Army says, be all you can be. And I thought that is what the US is. I don't have to be stuck. Yes, I may not make as much money as cardiologists make in this country, or if you go and work in the corporate sector. Most of the CEOs that you see of IT firms are of roughly around my age and the same batch. Shantanu Narayan, who is the CEO of Adobe, I know him very well. We used to be part of the same quizzing and debating circles while we were growing up in Hyderabad. So, but I just saw the US as an opportunity. So I skipped from the doing a PhD in business to doing a PhD in international relations and political philosophy. International relations as a discipline, once you get tenured as a professor, the first 5, 6 years as professors are very tough, where you have to publish in peer-reviewed journals, publish books. But once you get tenured, then international relations becomes like a garbage bin. You can do whatever you like and call it international relations. So, for example, my last book was on Sufism and political philosophy, Islam and good governance. And my next book, inshallah, will be on India. So look at the expertise. As long as you can produce quality research, you do your research, it is part of the world, you can do. So you have IR scholars studying specific cities in China. What is the role of women in Xinjiang province? What is the role of retired people in Shanghai, or what was the role of ex-military people in Delhi? What are they doing? They're running television shows and debates like Major Gaurav Arya and stuff like that. So you can do those books. This all becomes international relations. So I thought I got very lucky because it allows me to pursue whatever intellectual interests I have at that moment. And I continue doing that. These days, my passions are geopolitics, India's foreign policy, US foreign policy. I teach US foreign policy, and I also teach Sufism. So you can see this semester I'm teaching two classes. One is on Islam and politics in the Middle East mostly, but all over the world. And the other class is on political ideologies. So I'm teaching Marxism. In fact, this week I was lecturing on Marxism to American students. It's always fun to do that. And so every week we study one ideology and discuss its role. I did promise somebody to do a conversation on liberalism. I did do one on liberal theories in international relations, which is very different from liberal ideology. Uh, I have some. Sir, tell us something about your childhood and how were your studies? Oh, I was always a very good student. I came, I think, second only in the seventh grade while I was studying in Andaman and Nicobar Islands. My father was in the military engineering services. So at that time, when he was in MES in the military, if you took one hard posting, then you could get one posting of your choice. So my father served at the time of the China War. That's when he joined in Nagaland and on the border where we are talking about now, McMahon line. He was there. And after that, he got posted to Goa. And then he was posted on the LOC, the Kashmir border. And then later on, and I was very small growing up in those days, but I remember that he volunteered to go to Port Blair, Andaman and Nicobar Islands, where I studied sixth, seventh, eighth. So I studied up to fifth grade in Hyderabad, while my father was posted in Hyderabad. Then he chose to go to Andaman and Nicobar Islands. And because he chose to do that, he was allowed to come back to Hyderabad again. So I studied ninth and 10th in Hyderabad, in St. Paul's High School. Many of St. Paul's alumni are now subscribers of Khanversations. I'm glad to reconnect with you in Andaman and Nicobar Islands. I've studied at the Carmel School in Port Blair. Uh, I hated it. 9 months of rain, so I was forced to play football. I could not play cricket at all. I don't like football. I don't like playing football. I can't kick properly, so I keep kicking with my toe. They call it panja in India. So I did play a lot of soccer while I was in Andaman and Nicobar Islands. But the rain used to be awful, and the only period when it didn't rain, we used to come back on vacation for Hyderabad during the summers. So my experience of Andaman has been wonderful place, lots of wonderful Nariyal Pani, but a lot of rain. Uh, and then after that, I did my engineering in Hyderabad and then went to Mumbai, got an MBA, worked at Larsen and Toubro, Trikaya Gray, Procter and Gamble for a few months. Did a lot of private consulting work in copywriting, and then I came to the US, and I've been here since 1992. Uh, uh, this city and this house that now I live in Delaware is the longest that I have lived in one place. In India, I've lived in Mumbai, Goa. I was born in Aurangabad, and my Nanial, or my mother's side family, lives in Aurangabad. My father's side is from Hyderabad. So that much for my personal life. Uh, so that is very interesting. Uh, there are some issues that I would like to explore further. I want to continue to do work on U.S. foreign policy, on Conversations, India ki foreign policy. Uh, I have a I have a complaint about some Indian audiences. India is going through a very, shall I say, rising experience. People are on a rise, so there's an emotional high for people while it's going high. So what is happening is, like it happens in a match. Let's say you're playing a tennis match, which I do a lot. I'll be playing tennis tonight too. So let's say you won the first set and you're leading 2-0 in the second set. So some of us, while playing the match, assume that we have won this match and we start thinking of the next match. and start dreaming about holding the cup with the final. Now you're still in the first round. You start assuming that you're going to win this first round, and you're dreaming of the second round and third round and the final. And suddenly you realize that you've lost the second set because you're not focused on the present. So a lot of people in India, I think they are all dreaming very far ahead. India as the sole superpower, etc. And so when some critical comments are made about India and its foreign policy failures, etc., people get really very upset and start becoming abusive. That's not a good thing. It is very important to not turn a blind eye to data, spinning ideological interpretations. Especially, I notice on YouTube channels. Let me give you an example. I watch Sports Tuck. It's the Aaj Tak YouTube channel for cricket a lot. I'm a big fan of Vikrant Gupta. But on the fourth evening, Vikrant Gupta kept predicting. I mean, while Gavaskar was saying on TV that we don't know whether India will win, he was so sure that India would win. He kept predicting that India is going to win. And of course, the match was drawn. And then, if you remember that, I don't know which channel it was, brought all these pundits to forecast the result of uh, world discourse. I will try to answer your question. The pundits who were asked to forecast the outcome of the World Cup in Australia, the cricket, and they all predicted that India is going to win that. India didn't even reach the finals of that. So people are like trying to manipulate the emotions of Indians who care about their country. So be very careful that while people are playing with your emotions, you don't miss the realities of what India is and what India's place is in the world. You can focus on where you want to go. That's good. Keep an eye on the ball, but also don't lose sight of where we actually are, because you have to build a bridge from here to there. If you don't know where you are, then where will you build the bridge from? Uh, and World discourse. I'm a career banker. What are your thoughts on rupee trade inflation? Well, a lot of people are asking about de-dollarization and rupee trade. So what is the motivation for this? The motivation for de-dollarization is the abusive manner in which the United States is using. So, for example, the sanctions that the US keeps imposing on other countries, like on Iran and on Russia, and threatening secondary sanctions on anybody who trades. So, India's national interests was undermined by US threats to sanction Indian companies which will do business with Iran, for example. India has invested in the Chabahar port, and India is not fully able to use that because of the US use of dollars as a means to impose sanctions. So, a lot of people who are talking about de dollarization are doing that at the behest of the, shall we say, not US foreign policy, which is not in the global interest, but in very specific interests of certain lobbies in the US, or even US narrow interest. If the US is going to be the leader of the world, then it has to keep in mind the interests of the world. And as India's foreign minister Jaishankar Saab keeps saying all the time, that one of the problems with Eurocentric view is that Europe thinks that Europe's problems are the world's problems, but the world's problems are not Europe's problems. So these use of dollars, especially during the Ukraine war, use of international institutions like the SWIFT, etc., and weaponizing them all in the interest of just the West and causing problems for the rest of the world, is the reason why people are seeking to do de-dollarization. But unfortunately, the currencies of the countries which are seeking de-dollarization are not that stable, not that strong. But you will notice if you go and look at foreign reserves. So take a look at Israel, which is such a strong ally of the United States. But even Israel is diversifying its foreign reserves. So foreign currency reserves. So it's not 100% in dollars. It has, I think, a component in euros, a little bit of the British pound, uh, and yuan, and the Japanese currency. So what is interesting is that the Japanese currency and the European currencies are second and third, I think, uh, after the dollar in terms of reserve. But most countries, their majority, vast majority, it's like 60, 70, 80% of their foreign exchange reserves are in dollars. Everybody will take dollars. I travel a lot overseas, and sometimes I even forget to do currency exchange at the airports. There's not a single country in the world which has refused to take dollars from me. So I'll just pay in dollars. Sometimes they even give me a discount. There are many places in the world where, when they see in the wallet that I have dollars as opposed to the local currency, like in Argentina, people preferred that I pay them in dollars than in Argentinian currency. So dollar is a very powerful institution. It makes the U.S. things. The reason why the U.S. is never worried about trade deficits, even though the U.S. has huge trade deficits with nearly every country. It has trade deficits with India, with China, huge trade deficits of nearly $500 billion with China and with various other countries, is because the U.S. currency is dollar. So we will never be in the problem that Pakistan is. Pakistan's problem is not the debt, but the fact that they have a huge deficit of foreign reserves in any currency. They have what, $3 billion left in dollars, and they have much more to give. So de-dollarization is not that possible easy, and barter has happened in the past, but not at this great level. We will have to see. So, for example, will Iran buy stuff? Will Iran, which sells oil to India, will it take rupees? And if it takes rupees, then what is it going to do with Indian rupees? Which other country in the world will accept Indian rupees? Then they will have to come back and buy in India. So if there's a lot of mutual trade, so say, look at India Germany trade. It is very balanced. I think the total trade is about 20 plus $billion. I don't remember now off my head, but it's really the same. India is selling about $8 billion, buying in importing about 10, 12. So it's very balanced. With a country like that, you can do barter or just local currencies. But that kind of situation doesn't arise. The other thing is that if your legal system, your banking system, your currency becomes very stable and strong and has an attractive quality. So, for example, if tomorrow Argentina wants to buy bananas from Costa Rica and is willing to pay in Indian rupees, and Costa Rica is happy to sell them bananas in Indian rupees, then that's when the Indian currency will become uh, stronger. And I think we are far from that. India's share of the global GDP is less than 4%. India's contribution to the global economy is 4%. The US used to be 50% in 1950s. It is still about 23% of the global GDP is America. So that's why the American domination will continue. And because the US also does not do it solo, it has lots of allies, especially European allies, uh, that will continue. SB, what is your viewpoint on uniform civil code? I'm all for uniform civil code. Uh, there's a verse in the Quran which says that if you obey the Sharia, you must obey it fully. Muslims are being very selective in what they call Muslim personal law. It is limited to very few things. I completely dislike the way, especially the triple talaq, the polygamy. These are not important things at all. These are not important things at all. There are some things that Muslims have to do in order to be Muslim, which is fast in the month of Ramadan, pray 5 times a day. If you have money, go for Hajj. And to believe in God, one God, and to believe in Prophet Muhammad, and to give zakat, to give charity. None of these things which are required, the 5 pillars of Islam, will not be touched by uniform civil code. There will be no law in India that says you can't pray 5 times, you can only pray 4 times. Nothing like that. It is going to eliminate some minor, minuscule things that ulama have permitted. And and one of the problems with the Muslim personal law is that it is not intellectually vibrant. The ulama do not revise and revisit things. So for example, there are new kinds of birth control mechanisms. When the test tube babies were coming out, the ulama were totally confused. They didn't know what to deal with it. What will they do when cloning begins to happen? Now we have the issue of transgender and other alternative lifestyles. So they're recycling laws which have been articulated in the past. When I do what is Sharia, I will touch upon this issue to show you how, from the internal mechanism of ijtihad or internal Muslim thinking the uniform civil code is not. Let me give you an example. I live in the United States. The US doesn't have a Muslim personal law. The US has religious freedoms, which means you can practice your freedom, you can convert out of Islam. 25% uh, of Americans change their religion at least once in their lifetime. So people are constantly changing their religion, they are practicing, they are not practicing, nobody forces them to practice. We all live under a uniform civil code. So I don't think that Indian Muslims should have any problem in living. The ulama who are associated with the Muslim Personal Law Board, they will lose some privileges. But the manner in which they came forward on the triple talaq issue and the disgusting halala issue, that is not Islamic. Let me tell you very clearly. People do cite a verse from the Surah Al-Baqarah, the chapter 2, saying, oh, the Quran permits or even says halal. The Quran doesn't do that. The Quran, as a way to stop people from divorcing for frivolous reasons, says if you divorce your wife, you can never marry her again. You can't say, okay, I changed my mind. No, you can't. She will have to marry somebody else and live with them and consummate. And then maybe if they get divorced, you will marry. This whole business of marrying somebody for a few minutes, this is forbidden in Islam. Sunnis don't allow what is called as muta, temporary marriages. It is unpermissible. And according to Islamic law, if you have the intention to divorce, then when you at the marriage is not valid. You cannot go in with the intention that a year later, 2 years later, a week later, I will divorce. This is common knowledge. Muslim scholars know this, and in spite of that, if they have permitted halala, that is shameful of them. They should not be in that position at all. So as far as uniform civil code is concerned, I am all for it. There is a misunderstanding going on in the Muslim community, and that needs to be clarified, especially with Muslim Hindu leaders. And they are feeling that with all this talk of Hindu Rashtra and Hindutva ideology, Ram Rajya, etc., what is going to happen is the Uniform Civil Code will not be a democratic and pluralistic legal system, but it will be basically Hindu laws. So if Hindu laws become laws of India, and if there are no Muslim personal laws, then Hindu laws will be then forced on Muslims of India. That is the fear which is apparently ordinary Muslims who oppose Uniform Civil Code. They are coming from that position. So that needs to be sent across that the Uniform Civil Code that we are talking about is consistent with the current Indian Constitution. It is a directive principle anyway already that that there will be no compromise on religious freedoms under the Uniform Civil Code. So if you are Sikh, you can be Sikh. If you're Christian, you can be Christian. The Uniform Civil Code is not going to force you to become Hindu. And if that message can be sent clearly, I think more and more Muslims, especially Muslim women and others who have been marginalized by the weird interpretations of Islamic Sharia by Indian Muslim scholars, will support Uniform Civil Code. Uh, okay. I hope that satisfies you. But I am planning to find some important voices, like I did on the Pasmanda with Amna Begum, on the Pasmanda Muslim issues. I will try and do one on the Uniform Civil Code, because I think it's going to be an important topic in the 2024 elections. Uh, so people are also asking me questions about the West's attitude. Uh, Look, I'm an American. I've been here. No country has treated me as well as the United States. I have great opportunities. I have been very successful, uh, and uh, and I used to say long before I became an American citizen that if America is a metaphor, an experiment with freedom, inequality, and justice, then I was an American, even though I was not born in America. So yes, there are American values, and that's the beauty of America. We don't become part of a tribe. We don't become part of a culture. We keep our culture, we keep our race, we keep our religion, but we share certain values and certain ideas. That's what makes us Americans. And we share in the belief of democracy. We believe in tolerance, etc. In spite of all the stuff of racism that we accuse America of, and it is quite a racist country. If you ask African Americans, is there any other country they would choose to live in? I guarantee you most of them or all of them will say there is no better country than America, and most African Americans. And that's how I also say about Indian Muslims. If you ask Indian Muslims, would you prefer to live in India or would you prefer to live in Pakistan? I guarantee you, most of them will choose India. So, especially being a minority in Pakistan, even the migrants, the Mahajir in Pakistan are not treated well. So that is an important part. But in spite of all of that, there is a tribalism in the West, and so you can see how the West came together on the treatment of Ukraine because they are white and Christian and quote unquote European in their uh, origins. There is that element besides the desire to suppress Russia, use this as an opportunity to press Russia. There is a racist, racial dimension to the extraordinary support that Ukraine is getting, and you don't see that when it engages. So I'm skeptical whether India will ever become as close to the US as United Kingdom or Israel are. So given that in mind, plus India's and US interests are never always the same. They're two different countries, two different civilizations. So if the West will accept India, it will be for strategic reasons, for benefits, strategic and material benefits, not for cultural reasons. And so India has to keep that in mind. India is an Asian country, will remain an Asian country. India is not relocating into Europe or North America. And so India has its own interests. Yes, we can be great allies. We should be. We are natural allies. This talk about the oldest democracy and the biggest democracy are true. If you notice, even the Marxists in India, who've been very strongly Marxist, don't think of migrating to Russia or to China or any community. They migrate to the US. There are nearly more than 4 million, close to 50 lakh Indians in America. They're doing very well. We take to America like fish to water. So there's some natural similarities, even though we may have different words for it. The cultures are also very similar. We have Hollywood, India has Bollywood. There's a lot of religious tolerance, lots of pluralism, lots of acceptance of the other, and so India and the US can be natural allies, are naturally aligned. Yes, there are some difference. India, there is a little bit of suspicion and hesitation, and I think that is natural. And the US will have to prove its friendship over a period of time. I hope that there is no need for the US to prove its friendship in a disastrous situation like an Indo-China war. But I think that if the US continues to not take steps which undermine India's interests, India's development for say the next 5 to 10 years, then the suspicion that is there in the Indian elite towards the West, I don't blame uh, India. Even I am suspicious because you've grown up with the post-colonial experience. The British looted India for over 190 years officially, but they had started looting long before that, for over 150 years. And in many ways, the US is the inheritor of the British Empire in some ways. So yes, if Indians, and not just Indian, but post-colonial societies, if they are suspicious with the US, it is justified. So I think that while there is a lot of room for collaboration, cooperation, technology transfer, America is giving technology to India. India is giving technocrats to America. So it's a pretty good deal for both of us. We provide science; they provide scientists to us. So yes, so this is a natural alliance, and it is going well. So I hope you guys found some of my answers well. Ask your friends and your colleagues and your network to subscribe to Conversations. Uh, we do plan to do a lot more work, and look forward to the book that I will be dropping in the next 2 days. And the book is free. It's on email. It's a short book with 5 chapters about how the world will look like after the end of the US-Ukraine war. It's very interesting. You will watch that. You will, if you read that, you'll find it very stimulating. And that is all. I think we are coming towards the end of my time here. So once again, I'm grateful to all of you who support Conversations, grateful to all of you who have joined the session today, and please continue to watch Conversations. And if there are disagreements, we can hash them out in our discussions. I try to read a lot of the comments and try to respond to as many as I can. And sometimes I don't. So, for example, I think it was Rishi who kept asking me who to vote. She asked me more than once, and I did respond eventually. I think the U.S. elections are going to be very critical for American Indians. If you don't have very strong political and ideological preferences, right? If you're just doing your thing, if you're very rich, then it is in your interest to vote Republicans because they will not raise taxes for you. And if you are poor, not by poor, I mean, if you make less than $100,000, then you do need a lot of state support in many ways. Then Democrats are your way to go. But then if you have very specific political choices, specific foreign policy preferences, then obviously you are already very well informed and you can judge who to vote for. But let me tell you this much, while ideologically the conservatives may sound something that Indians may like, they may say nice things about India. But let me tell you one thing, that they are not open to diversity. When conservatives say that they worry about the loss of traditional America, the word traditional America is code for white Christian America. So when they say, oh, the traditional America is declining, they are essentially lamenting the loss of white Christianity. There is decline in Christianity in America. Less than 80% of the population says they are Christians. Less than 60% or around 60% are white. And in the next 30, 40 years, the whites will become a minority in this country. And eventually, Christians also will. If you look at the forecast, America will rely more and more on immigrants. If you take a lot of immigrants from the South, then of course the percentage of Catholics will increase, but the percentage of Hispanics will also increase. So America's demographic shifts are happening at a faster pace, and we have all seen in the past few years the population of Hispanics overtake the population of African Americans. So they are not the second. They are not the biggest the biggest minority of Hispanics, not African Americans, and so we are seeing significant changes in American politics. And the party which is at the moment more open to diversity and racial equality and social justice is the Democratic Party. They are the ones who are interested in making sure that you have equal rights, regardless of your religion, regardless of your ethnicity, regardless of your race. But so don't get carried away by the Republicans if they say, oh, we will help you with China or this or that. That is all they care about. But at home, they are worried about the decline of the demographic decline of the US. So, broadly speaking, I think that most people of color would lean democratic unless they are religiously very conservative. Like I said, if you are like obsessed with the abortion issue, or if you want to end immigration into America, then yes, DeSantis, the Florida governor, probably is your guy. So anyway, I hope you found this discussion useful. I will try to do this more often, uh, and uh, and I will try to do it at least once a month or even more often than that. Depends on how good the turnout is. But thank you very much to all of you. Be safe, be happy. This is Muqtedar Khan for Conversations. Take care. Bye.